And so while Colin's pulling up the presentation, I just want to introduce Heather Swanson. Heather Swanson is the Deputy Director for Resource Stewardship for City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks. And she's here to, as a Platinum sponsor, speak about all of the great work the City of Boulder is doing in land restoration, land preservation in and around Boulder. So help me welcome Heather to the stage.
Hi there. It is a pleasure to be here. This is my second year at the conference, and it's just so enjoyable to see such a vibrant community exchanging ideas, celebrating successes, and trying to figure out what their next steps are. So I'll go ahead and get started. The presentation can go or not. It doesn't really matter. There it is. So for some of you, you're very, very familiar with City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks. Some of you may be less so. So I'm going to give some sort of basic background and then talk about some of the things that we've been working on this year. So the City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks Department is one of the oldest municipal open space programs in the United States. And we really started out in 1898 when the city purchased their first open space at Chautauqua. And since then, our community has gone through a lot of planning for open space, and part of that was in the mid-'80s, an official charter was made part of the city charter, spelling out exactly what open space should be for the City of Boulder. And I just wanted to share two of those charter purposes, because for a municipal open space system like ours, they're somewhat unique. We have 8 charter purposes, and 2 of those are preservation of water resources in their natural or traditional state, which includes for agriculture, and preservation of agricultural uses and land suitable for agricultural production. So for many decades, the Boulder community has been focused not on open space preservation just for the purposes of natural lands management, recreation, and scenic beauty, but also for really maintaining and continuing that heritage of the Boulder Valley and Boulder County in agriculture. Next slide, I do it? Green arrow, there we go. So Open Space and Mountain Parks has approximately 16,000 acres that are currently leased for agricultural production to 29 different local producers. And some of the food that you had for snacks and for lunch may have been grown on open space properties. I think the amazing vegetables certainly come from one of our local producers. And of those properties, of those 16,000 acres, about a little over 6,000 of that is actually irrigated agricultural land. The majority of our agricultural programs are really livestock-based agriculture. We have more than 10,000 of those 16,000 acres that are based on native grazing lands. So these are native grasslands, some of which have never been tilled because of the rocky soils in the southern part of our system that are grazed for native land grazing. We also have about a little over 5,500 acres in irrigated hay production, and we also support 2 grass-fed dairies. We also have a number of vegetable growers. Like I said, our wonderful vegetables over here came, I believe, from open space. And those vegetable growers really have a number of markets that they serve. They have community-supported agriculture, farmers markets, farm-to-table restaurants, as well as larger regional restaurants. And we also added a soil health program more officially to our agricultural group in 2020. And Lauren Kolb is one of the organizers of the conference. It also heads up our soil health program. And one of the jobs of the soil health program is inventorying our soil health. So Lauren has done a baseline on our properties, and there will be resampling happening next year, so hopefully we can share some of that with you in our remarks next year. We've also done a lot of experimentation and learning about using things like compost and biochar, other treatments, cover cropping support for the tenants on our properties, and supporting our tenants in participating in outside programs like with our conservation district, like the STAR program, that really encourages soil health practices and recognizes those producers that are able to recognize improvements in their soil health. And our tenants really are partners with open space, and them and their agricultural their agricultural programs really serve critical functions and connections for our open space and our Boulder community. One thing on open space is we work really hard on many of our operations to really integrate ecology and agriculture. And in many places, our agriculture, the water irrigation that they do, the management that they do of the land is really helping support native species and ecosystems. Those tenants also perform a lot of the daily land management necessary on those 16,000 acres that we couldn't possibly, as an open space staff, perform. They're obviously contributing very heavily to local food production in the Boulder community and all of the benefits that come with that. They also serve a really key role in community learning and appreciation around agriculture, around where people's food comes from, and all of the interrelationships as part of that. They really are upholding the agricultural heritage of the properties that open space has the ability and pleasure to manage, and also maintaining that agricultural lifestyle in a county that obviously is rapidly changing. And they will be supporting open space resilience into the future as we really face changes in weather and climate and demographic patterns in the Boulder area. So just a couple of things that I wanted to mention we have done this year. We've had some large-scale land restoration projects, both agriculture and ecological restoration. And we've worked and experimented on novel approaches to rehabilitating degraded agricultural land on several hundred acres of agricultural land. We've also worked on regulatory changes that will better support farm dinners for those tenants that have their lease on open space lands. We've done residential property upgrades and renovations, as well as formalizing our policies to ensure that there is fair and affordable access to agricultural housing for those local producers. And we also completed a collaborative planning process for a property called the Fort Chambers Poor Farm property, which is a property that has been in agricultural production. It also borders Boulder Creek, and it has a history with the Sound Creek Massacre and the involvement of some of the local citizens at the time in that massacre. So it was a collaborative planning process with our tribal partners, and that was really looking at bringing together agriculture, ecological restoration, education, and cultural understanding and appreciation all on that one property. So that was really a fascinating opportunity there. And I think with that, I will just sort of wrap up by saying that our tenants are really critical partners in both the conservation and preservation of our lands, as well as obviously the management of our agricultural lands and maintaining that agriculture into the future. And we're just really grateful for the contributions that they make to the open space program and to our local economy. And we're looking forward to continued partnerships, which will be very important as our department and our local agricultural producers move into the future and continue to make strides in new and different and sustainable practices. So thank you very much. We're very, very happy to support the conference.
Good afternoon. I'm Brett Kincairn. I'm with the city also. Nice to follow my colleague Heather and to be just in front of Therese. How many of you are here for the first time this year? Raise your hand. Oh, fantastic. All right, now how many of you have come to 4 or more soil revs? Yes, that's my people. All right, I just want to say, let's give a big hand to the people who organize this. It's remarkable and to see what they've done. Really amazing. Every year they bring the most amazing people from all over the country, actually, for us to learn about this evolving space. I sort of feel like I have this annual climate update for you, which means that I'm a bit of a bummer in a little bit in the part of this show because most of what I'm having to report to you is not necessarily the best news, but as we know, we did set a record last year. It was the hottest year on record for the planet. Next slide. Oh, I have the slides. These. Oh, fantastic. Let's see if I can do this right. Yes, and we know that this year is probably on track to continue that record-breaking trend. This is not something new to our area. I showed this slide last year. This is actually a slide put together by our Open Space and Mountain Parks Department that shows you that sort of trajectory of temperature increases. One of the things that I didn't know when we first saw this slide was what a significant spike we actually can see in the Dust Bowl era. But that actually even past that, we had a very major spike in that 50s period. But it's very clear the trajectory that we're on and the kind of trend that we're seeing now for increasing and sustained higher and higher temperatures. So we've been trying to do some modeling to understand what these changes will look like for us into the future. A couple of years ago, both the city and county had a tool put together that takes these big, massive global climate models and downscales them to our sort of area so that we could try to see what these trends would look like into the future. So this is just a screenshot from that tool, which, by the way, is available to anyone. And it's not very difficult to use, and it's very interesting. It has multiple of the different scenarios of climate change built in. If you know what the representative concentration pathways, the RCPs are for 4.5, which is sort of like not so good, but maybe it's going to be okay, and the 8.5, which is not good at all. We don't want to go there. So it has those built in for at 2030 and 2050. And what we've seen from this, and this is from a report that we've just given to our own city council, is that we're facing some very significant trends. In fact, we're already seeing some very significant changes. So in days over 95 locally, we've already gone from historically about 5 per year. That's why we never used to have air conditioning in this area generally, to now over 10. We're now looking, if you look over on the right-hand side, by the middle of the century, we could be at over 50 days over 95 here in our area. You can see similar kind of, I mean, high fire days is the other one that's just, frankly, quite terrifying. Historically, our high fire risk days were in the, I think, 16 per year category. But of course now, we can have a wildfire in December, as we saw in the Marshall Fire. We're looking right now already at 116 days of high fire danger, and we could be by mid-century at over 200. So this is just to say, these are the kinds of changes that are coming that we have to prepare for. And we need to understand how we're going to manage lands in those contexts. And that's why it's really important for us to understand that the understanding of what's causing climate change is actually changing. This was the classic smoking gun sign of what was causing climate change. That pink line was actually the atmospheric carbon. The blue line was the fossil fuel emissions from burning fossil fuels. And so those things matched up nicely. And we say, there you go. See, climate change is being caused by fossil fuels. Now that's true in some ways, but there are other factors, including what we've been doing and how we manage the lands. And in fact, we have been decarbonizing the living world. There's a very interesting analysis that came out in 2017 in which they looked at what was actually in the atmosphere and where it came from. And what we've discovered is that over a third of what's in the atmosphere in terms of excess CO2 did not come from burning fossil fuels. It came from degrading land. So we've started to realize how we manage land is integral to why we're facing this kind of situation. So again, over a third of what's in the atmosphere came from land degradation. So now we start to see that these two curves actually align closely. So it wasn't just the fossil fuels, it was actually how we've been escalating the degradation of land as well. And so the reality of this, and this is kind of the worst part of the presentation, by the way, this is where the news is the worst. We are living on a planet, and this, if you add all the science up in different ways, we're living on a planet that's operating at something like 50% of its photosynthetic capability that it might have had just 200 or 300 years ago. Now that's the bad news. But as Dr. Heilman said, the good news is this is a system that can actually restart itself very quickly if we start working with it in a productive way. And imagine what the world could be like if you bring 50% more productivity of all life back online. It's remarkable. So we are seeing this locally, though. Of course, these are the kinds of things that we've seen. And what I wanted to show you, though, is it's not just about the carbon aspect of this. And I'm going to close by talking about the water aspect. So we've not only been sort of sending a whole bunch of carbon back up into the atmosphere, we have been dehydrating landscapes at an absolutely phenomenal rate as well. So in terms of the carbon, we've also looked at what's the role of our landscapes in the carbon cycle. Open Space and Mountain Parks did this exciting analysis in which we looked at that, and we found that we have about 2.5 million tons of carbon that we are stewarding in that 40,000 acres of land that we manage. Some of that's above ground, but a lot of it is below ground, which is why this is so important. This is a very interesting way of showing where that carbon is. So the far left side is all the carbon we manage, and then you can see where that carbon is. And grasslands actually have the largest share of that. Forests are, of course, very important, but it just goes again to say why soil and soil management is so important. Now, don't look at the right side of this for a second. I just want to show you the left side. This was an important insight from this report. How much carbon do we bring down out of the atmosphere into our landscapes in terms of this 40,000 acres that we manage? On a good year, we're bringing down about 12,000 more tons a year. Now, I'm not trying to make this to minimize this, but our annual community emissions is about 1.5 million tons, 1.2 million tons. So a way orders of magnitude smaller. So it's not so much how we manage our lands to capture more carbon, it's to make sure the carbon that we've caught is actually going to stay in our system. So again, this is the sort of bottom line report finding of this report. Now let's just talk a little bit about the water to close. This is a very interesting feature of what we now know. There is a physics relationship between heat and water in the atmosphere. And so one of the reasons that you're seeing so many of these deluge events is because the Earth has already warmed by almost 2 degrees. And that means that we have a massive amount of additional water, something really now we think about 15 or 20% more water in the atmosphere than we did just 100 years ago. So not only is our challenge to bring down carbon, our challenge is actually to bring down and start planting more of that water into our landscapes. So there's like it's hard to describe the volume of water that we have now in the atmosphere that we didn't have there. It's basically 5 times the volume of the Great Lakes that's now circulating through the atmosphere and arriving in these kind of, what they call them, atmospheric rivers now. So where we want to go, and what most of you are actually working on, is to reverse those cycles. So we've been talking a lot in the broader world about bringing carbon back down into soil, but what I'm trying to emphasize today and what I want to close to talk about is how we're starting to try to think about managing water back into our systems as well. So I want to call out our colleagues at the county who you're going to hear more about. They've launched a very exciting soil health initiative. I'm probably stealing Teresa's thunder a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that we said over and over again, there's a grant cycle out and open for that right now. You can get into that system for more resources to support your soil work. That is due, I guess, January 8th. I might get corrected, but I wanted to just note that part of what we're now understanding is that we need to be managing towards soil water reservoirs. And so one of the things that has started to happen are some new initiatives like this Enriches program from CSU, where they're going to start setting up a soil moisture reservoir monitoring system so that we can start managing for that reservoir. Because frankly, water in the soil is by far the largest reservoir that we have. We've started to try to look at this also, and this is the work I wanted to just update you on. Last year I described that we were launching into an effort to start an analysis to see how desertification is playing out in our area. As you know, if you drive north of here, there's desertification happening. We want to be able to actually develop systems that can watch that and can manage it so that we can be ahead of it and figure out where we can intervene. But more importantly, and this is the area that we're going to be doing this analysis on, this is basically the 2 conservation districts between Boulder and Longmont. But where we want to go is actually to a place where we use this new set of satellite-based technologies to see how we're changing the water cycling and the water holding dynamics, and ultimately develop incentive systems so that we can pay you to manage for that water capture and cycling. So that's where we're going. We're about halfway through the analysis process, and one of the things that I wanted to just indicate is that we'll be having some stakeholder meetings about this in the early spring. So we'll start getting that word out, and we'd love to have some of you participating. April and June. So just to say again, the role of this project is first to raise awareness. We are facing these changes in our landscape. The second is at what scale and at what pace, and how do we get ahead of that? And then starting to develop these systems that can reward those of you who are doing this good work to keep us on the right trajectory. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Therese Glowacki, and I am the Director of Boulder County Parks and Open Space, and we have been a sponsor since the very first soil revolution, and I could not be more proud. This is, and I have said this many times, this is my favorite conference that I go to in a year, and it is because of the hard work of this team that we have sitting down here. Really, another round of applause for them. So again, I saw a lot of hands going up saying this is the first time you've been here. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what Boulder County Parks and Open Space is. You heard Heather and the history of City of Boulder. They've been around for 130 or more years. Boulder County Parks and Open Space is not quite that old. But we'll get to that. This is the map of Boulder County, and Boulder County Parks and Open Space is the dark green and then the kind of bright green. So we preserve land both for open space, like natural lands for parks, like Ohio Valley Ranch, and we preserve agricultural land. And a lot of that is preserved that we own the fee and we lease it out to our tenants. So just like Heather said, our tenant farmers are the backbone of our agricultural operation. And we have about 26,000 acres of our land, which is in agricultural production. About 16,000 of that is in crops, and about 10,000 is in grazing. We have 62 tenants that we partner with, and they are amazing and innovative, and several of them are here. So thank you to our tenant farmers for coming today. How about a round of applause for them? And all told, they manage 120 different agricultural properties, and it's mostly on the eastern side. You can well imagine we like to farm where it's flatter versus the mountains in Boulder County. So we have been embracing soil health practices by providing grants to our tenants. This is the second year in our pilot program, and we are encouraging our tenant farmers to implement some of these 6 soil health practices. So if they are willing to, for example, leave the corn stubble on the fields and graze it, we are helping compensate for the cost that they would have sold that stubble. We have 42 projects we've done in the last 2 years. So again, our tenant farmers are really stepping up, and we're also participating in nationwide studies like the 1,000 Farms initiative that Dr. Lundgren is spearheading. So some of our tenant farmers are participating with that. And then, like Brett mentioned, our Office of Sustainability and Climate Action and Resilience, that's our OSCAR office. They have a booth out in the front, and they have the soil grant project that just launched December 10th, a couple of days old. Go ahead and look at Boulder County soil health grants, and you private farmers, it does not matter if you're a tenant farmer, if you're leasing land from the county, this is for private landowners. They are offering grants for you to implement soil health on your own properties. So please check that out. And the 2 photos you see here are adding compost addition to our farms, and again, the incorporating cattle grazing, which we heard so much about this morning. We also partner with our farmers. They work with the federal government, the NRCS, to get EQIP grants, which help pay for center pivots, so more efficient water use. And then we have Dan Lisko, one of our tenant farmers this year, tried a pilot project with seeding with drones. And that's what you see on the right. Talk to him about it. It seems like it was very successful. As far as reducing the impact on your soil, if you're dropping the seed from the drones, you're not driving that heavy tractor across the land. Really, it's new, good technology we're moving forward with. So ask Dan about that. And then part of Boulder County Parks and Open Space is the CSU Boulder County Cooperative Extension. And Lindsay is here. They have a booth. It's Adams County Extension, but Cooperative Extension is statewide. And they are coming up with all kinds of great trainings and moving forward with this soil revolution, again, as extension to you farmers out there. There will be more webinars coming up this year. Watch the Boulder County Extension website for those offerings, so you don't just have to finish learning today. You can come back and have it in smaller chunks and get more precise information on your particular interest. They are opening a sustainable landscapes position. And then also maybe Elizabeth Black, who's done the citizen soil science study, Extension is working with her to analyze the data. So again, great partnerships with County Extension. Visit the booth out there. Things that Extension does, helping with soil monitoring and doing demonstrations of new and great crops. And then finally, in 2025, Boulder County Parks and Open Space will celebrate our 50th anniversary. So 50 years we've been here protecting open space, 110,000 acres, 120 miles of trails, and as I said, 26,000 acres of agricultural land. So we're gonna offer farm tours like we have done in the past, and we really encourage you all to come help us celebrate what our community has created in the last 50 years. Thank you.